please join me in welcoming Sara Delpopolo and Access Legal for the launch of the International Social Media Association.
Woo! Woo-hoo!
I don't have my phone because I want to make a call. I've got it here to make sure that I don't go overboard because, you know, lawyers talk a lot. So, thank you very much to Claudia and Oliver and to Scott for that awesome video, which I only just saw with you guys for the first time, so that was lots of fun. They are actually part of our expert advisory board. But I thought I'd actually start by saying exactly what caused us to, or you know, what caused us, because it's not just me, it's a big team, I think, that are helping push this forward. Why we started it was this little book. This little book is our legal guide that my firm, Access Legal, decided to put together probably, 4 years ago now. And we put it together because of the stuff that we've been seeing, the problems that we've been seeing our clients go through, our friends in the digital industries, you know, other contacts. Everyone was really, really very confused about social media. And you know, this is something where you just didn't have the opportunity to wait like you did with a website. You know, you couldn't wait to be on social media and find out if everyone else was making a mistake. Basically, if you were not on social media, someone else may already have been talking about you. So, you know, this is pretty much how it started. And we received delivery of this publication about 2 weeks before Christmas holidays in 2013, and I was told to go away and think about the book launch over Christmas. You know, go away, think about the list, and I did. And I was sitting on Bondi Beach and I was visualising, you know, this book launch, and I thought, how boring. A book launch by a law firm, firstly, I probably wouldn't want to go myself. And secondly, and most importantly though, there was something not right, and I couldn't help but recall why we actually wanted to write this book in the first place. And it wasn't just because of the legal work that we were doing for our commercial, entertainment, marketing clients. It was some pretty horrible things that have been in the media in the previous 12 months. It was images of desperation and sadness of teenagers being harassed and bullied by their peers online and then committing suicide. It was images of, and instances like this one, of teenagers, young people being stalked online and then being found murdered 2 days later. And no one knew how to deal with this. Because it's not like going to your local police station saying, hey, I think someone's trying to climb through my roof. This was where you'd go to the police station, they'd go, so where is he? I mean, online. Have you complained to Facebook? Have you complained to Twitter? So, you know, there were a lot of issues. This is completely new charter territory, and the laws were just not being looked at properly. There are laws in existence, but are they really conducive to what really is happening now? So the thing is that these tragic stories did not stop with teenagers. Everyone remembers this. This is pretty much, you know, I think this hit home for us in Australia because it was something that was local, and it's an example of, you know, of the terrible things that were happening. And they are actually hitting close to home. And they can be someone who's employed by your company. It can be someone that you know. So, you know, things like this, even though, you know, we're kind of like in the corporate world, we're in the digital marketing, or, you know, I mean, us, we're lawyers obviously, but you guys. But this could be anyone. And it can actually affect you, and it can affect your brand, it can affect everything that happens in your office. So, when I was thinking on Bondi Beach of this, you know, dorky book launch, I was just like, no, we've got to do something else. So I came up with this wonderful idea, and I went back to the office pretty much the first week of January, and I've gone, got it, we're not doing a book launch, we're going to start an international organisation, it's going to be called the International Social Media Association, we're going to have a global board, we're going to have like expert digital industry advisors, because let's face it, lawyers tend to kind of like go way off track and get all wrapped up in how excellent and smart they are in contracts. But the reality is, who's actually reading this stuff? Who has time to read this stuff? It's all on mobile. Like, you know, click, accept, and go, right? That's how we all are. No one has time for a 55-page agreement. So I said, we're going to start this organisation, and we're going to do all these amazing things. And they all kind of looked at me like, ooh, you know, so some sunstroke. So she's clearly gone crazy. And you know what? I think they might have been right, but they're all still here, right? So basically, you know, as I said, we then said, okay, well, let's go. And there were a few people who are in the room well, they actually did look like, you know, they did look at me like I was crazy, but I think that they were so used to me that they thought, well, she is crazy, but she's going to do this. So let's just run with it. It's a good idea. And I was pretty convinced that I would find other lawyers in the world who also felt the same way. And I was also really convinced that the issues that we were facing and seeing online were not just, you know, Australian problems, they were global problems. I knew that we'd have some really great, you know, friends. I had really good friends in the digital media industry, and I knew that they wouldn't necessarily be looking at me like I was crazy. You know, they'd probably think it was a great idea. So, you know, this is how we actually got here. And I knew that, you know, no one did know the laws on social media, and we had been fortunate. You know, we wrote this little book. It was a guide. It was intended, you know, for whether you were in-house, whether you were a digital marketer or HR. You know, we thought, well, we're going to do something that's accessible and it's easily, you know, understood. And, you know, if you want to be a dorky lawyer and click on, you know, the sections of the legislation and read the cases and delve into the explanatory memoranda, well, go for it. But we thought we can actually offer something. And so this book is actually now being written by our global board members, and I'll tell you where they're from in a minute, but we're actually going to be converting this into an e-publication, which will be interactive and available to ISMA members. So that's, you know, one of the things that we've been working on. And I think that was the easiest place for us to start, right? Social media education for everyone. You know, so as I said, it didn't matter whether you're an individual, it didn't matter whether you were a blogger, whether you were a lawyer, whether you were in government or in, you know, enforcement. I think that we found that there was a niche and there was some information that needed to be had. So we were hearing about, you know, things like companies firing employees because of what they were doing on the social media, and then next thing you know, being hauled up before the Fair Work Commission for unfair dismissal. I mean, the Commissioner probably just figured out how to send an SMS, but here he is actually making decisions on technologies that, you know, you've maybe never even seen. You know, we saw, you know, things happening, you know, around the Spam Act. You know, confusion about privacy and spam and how do they interact? You know, what's going on there? There are so many questions that came up. So, as I said, that was our first job, converting our social media playing by the rules into an interactive guide. And the second job that I decided that we would do, with the global board that at the time didn't exist, it was just me and my team in the office in Sydney. But I was like, the global board is going to go and seek harmonisation around the world, because I had seen what was happening in IP. So, I mean, my roots are intellectual property and IT, you know, the old IT software contracts that no one cares about anymore. But we saw what was happening with IP. Now, IP is fairly harmonised. There are international treaties and there's a bit of a reciprocal understanding between the different countries. So I was like, well, why can't we do this for social media, right? So that's when I went, we're going to actually do this. We're going to find some areas in law that we can harmonise, because that's what we need to do, right? I mean, there are no borders in cyberspace. So, with my second announcement, I was obviously mad because we didn't have a global board. But this was just less than 2 years ago, and I'm pretty pleased to say that we actually do have a global board now. We have representatives from the US, from New Zealand, Russia, South Africa, Singapore, China, Israel, Thailand, and India. And it all started here in Australia.
Woo! 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 Woo!
Plus, we're hoping to confirm representatives from Italy, France, Switzerland, Malta, Brazil, Mexico, and the UK in the next month.
Woo!
And last, obviously, not to mention our awesome digital experts who make sure that us lawyers do stay on the right track and are looking, into the future, so we don't have issues of playing catch up with the legislation, which is effectively what's happening now. So over the past 12 months, our international board members have been writing their global guide, and we're hoping to get that up very soon. And following a recommendation by our expert digital industry advisors, they were like, there's actually no one who knows what exactly these social media platforms are talking about. Like, has anyone ever done a comparison of the terms and conditions? Does anyone know? And so we're like, let's do it. So that's exactly what we did. Now, I'm not going to bore you and take you through this because that would be sad. I'm actually thirsty. But you can read all about it in our report. This is actually supported by a white paper. This wonderful little diagram is a summary of what ended up being a 180-page A3 document. So we've reduced it into that, and there's a white paper that's been written now. This took 6 months, and we are running a law firm as well, so don't be too mean on us. But it took 6 months, and in the 6 months, each one of these top 10 social media platforms went through 3 major overhauls to all of their terms and conditions. Right? 6 months. Now, that's not to mention that I believe Facebook has just done its 4th amendment to the privacy rules in 6 months, right? So they're having an issue. I think they need ISMA, right? The other thing that was incredible is that Apple iTunes, for example, their terms and conditions are 68 pages long, A4. A4. I think that's about 520 of these screens, right? I wouldn't read them. We only read them now, right? The Facebook terms and conditions, and I'm not kidding, took me just under an hour to print. That's because, not because my equipment is crap, but because I couldn't even find half the stuff. It was like playing a game of snakes and ladders, an hour. Like, it was insane. So, the white paper that we've actually got, which will be available again to ISMA members, is pointing out some of the problems that, not only the ISPs and the social media platforms are facing. So, for example, the issue that minors may not even be legally bound. I mean, we all know that Facebook and all of the social media platforms, I think even LinkedIn, for anyone who wants some slave labour, has reduced their age to 13. 13 years old. The age of majority in Australia and most of the countries around the world, including the US, is 18, and in some cases it's 21. So if you don't think that that's actually going to affect you as digital marketers and companies, well, how many 15-year-olds out there have got a part-time job working in retail, working at Macca's or Hungry Jack's or whatever? How many of them are potentially working for your clients that you're creating omni, channel marketing, campaigns and content? So they are actually real issues. They're also issues if you're trying to actually assign copyright from a 13-year-old who was entered into a Facebook competition. Not enforceable, guys. So these sorts of things no one's really thinking about because the laws are just not sensible when we're looking at the fact that, let's just not kid ourselves. 14-year-olds know exactly how to use social media. They know how to use their Facebook. They understand that when they're actually downloading something, they might be using mum and dad's credit card. So, that's just one of the things. The other things, for example, that we looked at were privacy and data. We looked at intellectual property rights, risk management and compliance, big issues. This is just at board level. And obviously looking at how we can actually help. So at the moment we've got issues in broadcasting laws. These things are pretty much covered in the white paper. So for example, broadcasting laws barely make mention of the internet, let alone mobile. But we all know that, there are some people on YouTube that have got, 1.2 million followers, and they're getting endorsements, they've got paid advertising, sponsorship deals, but yet they're not actually captured under broadcasting legislation. So, I mean, when we look at where the future of communication is going, the laws are well and truly way too far behind. So if you think that that's all well and good and you still don't care, we had a look at some interesting stats. The complaints lodged on social media have completely gone off the charts. They're into hyperspace at the moment. In 2014, Google dealt with 352 million copyright complaints. That's 1 million a day just on copyright. So I have no idea how many, they must have hired a country to sort that out. Twitter in the first half of 2015 dealt with over 35,000 takedown notices. So if you think that everything is okay, then clearly it's not, because complaints are on the rise. And when you consider that social media platforms are expected to deal with these complaints within 24 hours or hell will break loose, then it's not unusual and shocking to find that sometimes the decisions that they actually issue out when you put your takedown notice in are wrong. Because how on earth are they expected to have, really great complaints handling policies? It's just physically impossible. It might be that they're automated. So, smart contracts and automation does not necessarily work all the time. I can tell you that we've seen evidence in even our own situation where we've got clients that have got global registered trademarks, and we've issued takedown notices for infringements, obvious ones, and Facebook have come back, made a unilateral decision, and said, no, we think it's all right. I mean, in those instances, if this was your company and you're actually defending your IP rights, what you've got there is Facebook or any one of the social media platforms giving the tick and an okay to someone else infringing your trademark rights. And that would ordinarily make them also complicit in the trademark infringement. So these are the things that are happening at the moment. The laws are not assisting. So, let's go next. With the table, I'm telling you, I'm keeping a track of my time here, right? So this table, for everyone's information, is now being, a similar analysis is being done by our global board members. So we'll be seeing some really interesting results as to how the social media platforms are enforceable in the different countries. And I think that will reveal some really interesting similarities, which is actually what ISMA is going to be working off as a basis to start off some real steps and making some real steps towards harmonisation. So, everyone's talking about what's been happening last week. The exit of the EU, of Britain from the EU. The exit of the EU from Britain would be another story, that's next week. Right, now this official slice is going to be occurring in 2 years. But what you've seen, for example, with Scott's video and what you've heard tonight from Oliver and Claudia and myself, we don't have another 2 years. Definitely not when it comes to social media. We have to make sure that we can actually close the gap on the laws that are governing the global. Next slide. Operator, thank you. This is Pangea. Now I can remember, but apparently all of my staff who maybe went to school a little bit, not as long ago as I do. They remember this from geography. I must have been asleep in that lecture. But it's actually based on the ancient map of the world, pre-continental split from over 300 million years ago. And I thought it was really interesting that we're looking at, everyone's having a heart attack at the, Britain leaving the EU. But what we really have here is a borderless digital world that we are absolutely 100% living in today. So we are in fact moving back towards Pangea. And I think that, despite Brexit, despite everything that's happening, this is what makes what ISMA is trying to do so important. Effectively we're trying to create our own Pangea of global laws. So, we're trying to, fix up the laws, make sure that there's proper education, look at harmonisation, because it is possible. It's not impossible. Of course it's going to take ages. I mean, it's a launch tonight. It's not a finale, right? But I think you need to start one step at a time. And we've got a really great team. We've got really great supporters. And, let's face it, there are lots of instances where countries have signed global treaties to, facilitate international trade and commerce. It's not an unusual concept. I mean, I'm not making this up from scratch. So why not with social media? It's completely possible. So the objectives of ISMA, as I said, are not small, but I really do believe when people come together, they can actually do some things, and it is just one step at a time. And this is actually just one step towards. So ISMA is pretty much looking to all of you for support and, patronage and membership and, love and information to make sure that we can actually achieve our objectives. So that's pretty much it from me. Thank you.
Woo! Woo-hoo! Ow, ow!